Alabama, LSU, of course, grabbing most of the national attention, and a game that we circle on the calendar just about every year. But how about Penn State at Minnesota? Who would have guessed that both of these teams would be undefeated at this point in the regular season? Of course, the Golden Gophers with a backloaded schedule, so a lot of people are curious to see what they've got for us in November. We've got Daniel House on the line from Score North and Gopher Hole to break down the Golden Gophers. Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for tomorrow's game. We haven't had one like this in quite some time in Minneapolis, so everyone's pretty excited about Gopher football and what PJ Fleck has done with this program.
Yeah, so before we grind down to the current narrative and the game tomorrow, PJ Fleck, he did a reclamation project at Western Michigan, lifting them from a one-win team to a Cotton Bowl appearance and an undefeated regular season. Of course, the lift at Minnesota, much more difficult against the likes of the programs that he has to face in that conference at that level. But at the same time, it seems to be working out. And the transformation in this football team late October, early November, once Rob Smith was dismissed as defensive coordinator and they settled on a quarterback, and what they were able to do against quality competition in November was pretty astounding based on how they had played most of the season.
Well, I see the physical domination down the stretch. That was the big key. They had a lot of young offensive linemen that were still learning the game and the techniques, and they finally started to really become cohesive down the stretch, and that's carried over into this season. PJ Fleck just totally flipped the script of how this program recruits. When he arrived here, the Gophers wide receiver group was a bottom 5-tier position group in the nationally, and now I see what they're able to do. They're top 5 in the country with Rashad Bateman, Tyler Johnson, Chris Ottman-Bell, even Demetrius Douglas. They have created an aerial attack and added the physicality. They're continuing to bolster the depth on the defensive line and the offensive line, and that's really paid off in a physical Big Ten where you have to have the skills in the trenches to keep up with these teams that prioritize running the football. And now Minnesota, they control time of possession. They have a 66% rushing play rate. They love to attack on the perimeter. When teams start to stack the box and try to stop Rodney Smith, Mohamed Ibrahim, Shannon Brooks, they have just playmakers everywhere. So it's harder to defend this team because if you want to play with lighter boxes and take away the pass, then Minnesota can run the ball. And then if you want to stack the box, they have those playmakers on the outside that can create plays.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down Minnesota, Penn State, noon Eastern time tomorrow. And this one critical to both programs, both teams for 2019. And before we move off the big picture narrative of PJ Fleck and what he's been able to accomplish, he's the type personality, Daniel, that either you gravitate to him or maybe you kind of shy away and think, okay, a little bit too car salesman-ish for me, to be a bit generic about the stereotype there. But obviously it's resonating. He is selling it. And if you can keep up that kind of energy long-term and that kind of vision, and then you match it with substance, and obviously he's been able to do that, you win some people over.
Yeah, he is who he says he is. He's real all the time. He's genuine. I've had the chance to be around him. He's one of the most unique coaches you're ever going to find. He really loves his players. He has so much energy. He's connected with the community. Row the Boat is just a way to bridge the gap between the community and the Gopher football program, just connecting people. I've watched how Fleck came in here and just totally flipped the script of how people perceive Gopher football, has recruited the right players, the things that they do in the community, such as going to the Children's Hospital and using Row the Boat to make an impact. That's what I love about PJ Fleck, is the impact that he's not only had on the field and in recruiting and building the Gophers brand, but the fact that he has been able to really impact the community and find players that really buy into what he wants to do, because he's not for everyone. And he is an amazing coach at just finding the right players that do what he wants and execute the things that he wants, because it's demanding. And he asks a lot of his players, not only on the field, but off of it. And that's a culture that they've created. And the chemistry and the way that they play together is one of the reasons why they are so successful right now.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down Penn State and Minnesota. Of course, like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe if You love college football as much as we do. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here each and every day as we talk Gophers with Daniel House. You can join him at Score North and also Gopher Hole. He's got the gamut covered when it comes to Minnesota athletics at the university level and those Minnesota Vikings. Tough defense there for the Vikings this year, and it has been for the last couple of years.
Yeah, the defense has been a key for Mike Zimmer and his team, and the secondary's been a little bit shaky this year, but they still have that front seven that can create a lot of havoc. So some consistency with the Vikings is needed, especially down the stretch here as they try to make the playoffs. But the offense has been up and down. Kirk Cousins is still trying to, establish some consistency. But I don't know. The Vikings down the stretch is interesting, but the peak interest right now is the Gophers. I honestly haven't heard much about the Vikings, and people know this is a Viking state. Like when the Vikings are on, everyone's watching, but everyone is talking about the Gophers this week. Everywhere you go, there's maroon and gold on. People are really excited about this.
Christmas is coming. Shop Amazon. Use the link in the description section below. I know a ton of people. You're on Amazon. Please use the link. It's the same shopping experience. You help us build the channel. You mentioned Kirk Cousins. We'll segue that to Tanner Morgan. Once his team settled on a quarterback, which of course was an interesting storyline that Zach Annexstad was named the starter as just the second, let me get this straight, walk-on true freshman quarterback to start for a Power 5, and the other guy I think has a starting job somewhere in the NFL right now. But Tanner Morgan, I traced the last 10 years, and I really didn't even need to go through this process, Daniel, because your typical Minnesota quarterback, and Mitch Leidner comes to mind first and foremost, but there's a ton of them. You're going to get that 11 touchdowns, 9 interception type year, throw for about 53%. This Minnesota passing offense is not necessarily prolific compared to what you see across the country because the numbers are just exploding. But 18 touchdowns and 4 picks, we've not seen that kind of ratio out of a Minnesota quarterback maybe in forever.
The efficiency of Tanner Morgan has been impressive. He's just one of those guys that has always overcome the odds. I did a story with Tanner Morgan's dad and his kinesiologist. It's actually interesting how Tanner Morgan has developed his mechanics. He works with a movement coach, and he's talked with a lot of different quarterback coaches and worked with them. And the last quarterback coach he was with said, hey, let's do a video call with this kinesiologist that I know named Rob Williams. And he runs Sport Core Performance. He's worked with some NFL teams, different Division I quarterbacks, Power 5 guys, consulted with some NFL teams, including the Saints. And Tanner sent some video to Rob Williams, and he analyzed all of his throwing mechanics. And all he does is he's doing nothing with like the processing or the reads or anything. He's solely looking at Tanner's mechanics. He sent back video feedback with like a whole bunch of illustrations that I included in my article on Score North, talking about how Tanner could become a rotary athlete, more compact, getting the football out quick, which fits really well in an RPO system where you're trying to get the ball out quickly. And so Tanner has taken the last, 6 months and just really bought into this whole movement of mechanics and what Rob Williams was telling him to do. And it's paid off in a big way. And teammates gravitate towards Tanner. I just love the way that he leads the team. He has this ability when he's in the room that everyone just comes right to him. And that's what you want at the quarterback position. He's led this team at extremely high level. And I'm excited to see how he responds in this big game where Penn State's going to send a lot of pressure. They're an aggressive team. They have a great front seven. So getting the ball out quick is going to be a big key in this game.
Yeah, of course, Tyler Johnson, 43 catches, 7 touchdowns, has been a star in the Big Ten for a few years, and Rashad Bateman having a nice season in regards to leading the Big Ten in yards per reception, and Zach Annexstad has benefited from that as well. He leads the Big Ten in yards per attempt this year, in addition to the 65% completion percentage. Rodney Smith, of course, Daniel, has been a name that's been on campus forever. This is his 6th year because of the injuries and getting back the eligibility, but he just recently passed Darrell Thompson in Minnesota lore as the all-purpose yardage leader in school history. So, of course, the balanced attack against that level of defense is going to be paramount as well.
Yeah, Rodney Smith, they call him Grandpa around here because he's been around so long, and Coach Fleck kind of jokes about it quite often with Rodney, and he embraces it. He likes being called Grandpa. So I look at the Gophers rushing attack. The first few weeks, it really wasn't clicking. They weren't finishing blocks. It just wasn't consistent and cohesive up front. They were still very young, and I think a lot of people just expected they were going to roll right in to the season and build off of all the momentum that they had at the end of last year, where they just physically dominated games like against Wisconsin and Georgia Tech in the bowl game. But it's slowly started to progress. It's improved every single week. The rush rate is about 66% for the Gophers right now. However, when teams start to stack the box to stop the run, because they've had so much success with this outside zone rushing scheme that they've paired up with the bread and butter inside zone, Rodney Smith, 92% of his explosive runs have come off outside zone. So my anticipation is that Penn State's going to try to take that away, and then Minnesota will counter with a ton about inside zone, which is what they do best. However, Penn State has struggled with like pin and pull concepts where centers and tackles pull out into the second level. That's something that could be exploited, but Minnesota has a lot of running backs. It's not just Rodney. It's Mohamed Ibrahim. He's been fantastic. He was so good as a freshman last year. Yards after contact, physical runner. Shannon Brooks is back too. It's kind of a two-headed monster between him and Rodney. He's the home run hitter. He gets in the open field, and he isn't afraid to lower his shoulder and just pick up additional yardage and pop off explosive runs. And I just see that Rodney, Moe, and Shannon trio with the Bateman, Ottman, Bell, and Johnson trio at wide receiver. There's playmakers everywhere. I don't think Penn State, when you look at their schedule and you break down their tape, they haven't played a team with this type of playmakers yet. So it's going to be a great test for both teams.
Yeah, when you mention a test, everyone attributes to the test being Minnesota's test against Penn State in the first time that they've played this level of team, but they rarely flip it, and it certainly applies on the other side as well, although Penn State, of course, faced a decent Pitt team. Michigan provided Michigan-type athleticism, but it's a different challenge here in Minneapolis with the elements and with the Gophers' talent and just their efficiency. We're looking at the number one rated rush defense in the Big Ten, I should say, with Penn State at 68 yards per game, going up against the top 3 rush offense. So something's got to give to a certain extent right there. But again, Penn State's facing maybe the best defense that they will face this season to date. Michigan would be right there again as well. Your thoughts about that matchup as we flip sides of the ball?
Well, I just see the whole landscape of Minnesota's defense. The pass defense has been the catalyst of everything. You see how much they've relied on their cornerbacks. They play a lot more man coverage, which has simplified the responsibilities of the front seven and allowed the outside players to defend the run and focus in on those responsibilities. So I see the Gophers really being aggressive with the front seven. They run a NASCAR package that they deploy with a lot of their pass rushers. They'll stunt. They'll be aggressive. Antoine Winfield Jr. is one of the best players in the country, top defensive player in the Big Ten. His versatility has been huge. I wrote about it last week. They used some cover one robber concepts where he was in the middle of the field, manning out around and just kind of spine, and he can defend the run. He can help you in the pass defense area too, just by manning the middle of the field in that scheme. And KJ Hamler's the big test. How do they defend him? My guess is they maybe play some zone behind, match up Chris Williamson, the slot cornerback, pull in Coney Duro occasionally, use Winfield out of zone to help slightly. That's going to be one of the main focuses. And then Pat Freiermuth, the tight end, has been a dynamic weapon in the red zone. Gophers have to account for him. A lot of teams are really aggressive. They play man coverage. Don Brown, when they played Michigan, he was like, okay, we're going to play cover 0 with no safety help. Freiermuth, they run a slant with KJ Hamler, wheel route fade with Freiermuth, easy touchdown. So you have to account for Freiermuth because they like to run picks and different things to try to create deception and slow up the second level of defenses. So the Gophers will have their hands full. The matchup on paper to me is really interesting when it comes to trying to create pressure, put Sean Clifford in positions where he has to maybe make a poor decision. Turnovers will be key in this game. The takeaways, if you can get one of those, create a short field, start fast, the team that does that is probably going to win this game.
So, of course, Minnesota's done the work that it needs to do to get in this position, won a lot of close games early, has been more dominant as of late. Wisconsin, Iowa lie ahead in regards to Big Ten Western Division supremacy. This game is huge against Penn State, of course. So the work has yet to be done in regards to the heavy lifting. The number 17 ranking in the college football playoff obviously has to be taken into consideration as what it is right now. A team that they're waiting to have prove themselves. Is there still some level of concern that this team's being disregarded to that level as a Big Ten team, being that far down in the rankings as an undefeated team, that the committee's sending some kind of message?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you control what happens down the stretch. If you come out and win these games, the Gophers right now have the toughest remaining schedule of any team left in college football right now. So you see the opportunity with Penn State at home. They go to Iowa next week, Northwestern, who's struggling, and then Wisconsin at home. Two of the toughest games, arguably, are at home. So you have the opportunity to create that advantage by playing at TCF Bank Stadium. They sold out TCF Bank Stadium for the first time since 2015. So there should be plenty of excitement. I haven't witnessed Gopher football in a big game like this in my whole lifetime. I mean, this is crazy. People are really excited about it. I just feel like the players are going to feed off that. The chemistry of this group is what people really. I get to see it because I'm around the program more, and I just watch how they're focused on. Coach Fleck likes to talk about all the time, the four walls of the facility. They don't listen to any outside noise. Like, players have no idea what's going on with the rankings. They're focused on what they're doing, and you see that preparation on the field with, like, Joe Rossi's defense. The switch with Rob Smith after he was fired, the biggest thing I noticed was just simplifying everything down, focusing on the preparation, maximizing player potential, and now you see that. So you look at this group, what they have in front of them, it's amazing what they could do. Now let's see what happens when they play some top-tier competition. We'll learn a lot more about them and other teams like Penn State in a game like this.
I'm hearing rumblings that Minnesota has to go undefeated to make the college football playoff, and I would just think that would be crazy if they go 12-1 as the Big Ten champion. Mark in your loss. If it's not 55-0, if it's a typical loss, Penn State, Wisconsin, Iowa, whoever it is, if they win the Big Ten and beat the likes of Penn State or Ohio State in a Big Ten championship game with one loss, they better be in the playoff, or I'm going to rant and rave. And I've got no horse in the game, but I'm going to rant and rave for a week nonstop because that's just crazy. I have to think right now, Daniel, that if we gave Clemson Minnesota's results, that they wouldn't be ranked 17th in the country.
It's one of those things where it does matter which school it is, and the body of work sometimes doesn't align correctly. However, when you get to the point where you have these types of games at the end of the season, the committee simply has to start buying in eventually. If you can win and show that you're deserving of those accolades, then they will follow. All you have to do is focus on your own business. I'm just excited for this game. I see Minnesota's pass catchers against Penn State secondary possibly being an X factor. You see 12 receptions, 408 yards, and a TD on passing plays of 20-plus yards. Penn State's only allowed 2 passing touchdowns their cornerbacks have this year. So you can see the theme of deep passing. Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman, they each have 12 combined receptions of 20-plus yards. So I see the deep passing game being quietly an X factor. And John Reed, the senior cornerback for Penn State, he got dinged up last week. They went down the depth chart. Trent Gordon got hurt in that game. They were down to true freshman Marquise Wilson. They expect John Reed to play. However, fans need to really watch the secondary versus Minnesota's playmakers. And then I think Penn State's defensive line versus Minnesota's offensive line. Those are the X factors because Minnesota, they love to run the football, but they also have the balance. I think people think Minnesota is just a running team, but they have the perimeter playmakers to play whatever style that you would like. So I'm excited. Let's see what happens with these matchups.
It's sometimes difficult to kill those stereotypes, and there's certainly one about Minnesota football being a plotting style on offense. Sure. And they certainly still want to be physical, but that's not being plotting necessarily. And people will catch up with the current narrative if they check out the game against Penn State. And it is arguably the most important of the day, considering the cushion that Alabama and LSU's loser will probably get. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down Minnesota and Penn State. A tremendous take here from Daniel House. We encourage you to jump over to Score North and Gopher Hole to check out his work there in covering Minnesota football and athletics overall. Daniel, we appreciate you stopping by, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me. Enjoy the game this week.